So this is gonna be the hardest video I've ever had to make. Because I've been living a lie. I've just not been honest with you and myself, which has led me to be in a dark place. It's so hard, you know. When you're a tech YouTuber, everybody thinks you've got your tech stuff together. That you can do tech things better than other people. But the truth is, I don't have any network access storage. I've just been using a pile of loose hard drives for years, like some kind of animal. So today, we need to fix that. Now, not only do I not have a NAS, but my storage configuration is wildly savage. It's the kind of thing that would make Linus cry. Now, basically what I've been doing for the last millennia is buy these 8 terabyte hard drives and then fill them up until they're done and then just add them to this pile. But don't worry, I have a system here. I've marked them with Sharpies, so I know that this is the second drive I bought. This is the first drive I bought, so I can kind of figure out how old the data is on it by the Sharpie number. And at this point, I think I'm at drive 9? Where is the most recent one? Oh, so this is the most recent one, which I can tell because I haven't marked it with a Sharpie yet, and it's a 12 terabyte drive. Ooh, fancy. Now, the way in which I put data on these hard drives and get it off is by using this toaster thing, which is like an external hard drive caddy that you just drop the hard drive in. And then there's also the issue of storing the hard drives, because I've just kind of kept them here on the side of a sit-stand desk, which, you know, I raise and lower semi-regularly, which does present its own problem. And here is evidence of said problem. I wish I could say that I've only had one of these drives fall off the desk once, but it's happened several times. Although it's okay, because they're not running, right? So the data on them has survived every fall. See, it's not that high. And aside from the fact that this is just the storage solution of an animal, I'm also desperately in need of more space, because I've got like 1 video worth of space left on the last hard drive, and this isn't even a hard drive that I bought specifically for the use case. I just found it in a pile, and I just can't bear adding another hard drive to this pile. And then the final issue is, because of how long I've been putting this off, I need a huge amount of space, and a huge amount of space is very expensive. Like, really expensive. It's one of the reasons it's taken me so long to get around to this, because every time I calculate how much space I need, I just start weeping for days at a time over the expense I'm gonna have to incur for this. And because of how many huge hard drives I need, I just couldn't get anybody to send me any drives. Ooh, I put that down way too hard. In fact, this may actually be the most expensive video I've ever made, but luckily I got a lot of help from the Patreons. Because of generous monthly support from many individuals, I managed to buy $5,000 worth of hard drives, which actually doesn't buy as many hard drives as you'd expect. I even had to buy the hard drives in 2 batches from separate e-tailers because they just didn't have enough stock. And the hard drives in question are 8 of these 22 terabyte Iron Wolf Pro drives. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't mean I'm gonna get, hold on, 176 terabytes of storage, because I want some failsafe built into my NAS. But we'll get into what storage configuration I'm gonna use a bit later. So thank you so much to everybody that supported the channel on Patreon up until this point that makes an absurd video like this even possible, without me having to mortgage several of my children and file for Chapter 5 bankruptcy. Is that a type of bankruptcy? I don't know. But anyway, with that, let's get the rest of the components for the NAS that I'm gonna build and get started. In terms of platform, I've decided to go with AM4 because AM4 has ECC support, which apparently, according to people on Reddit, is very important for a NAS. Now, I could have gone with an older Intel Xeon platform like a lot of people do for NASs, but I wanted to give a consumer hardware AMD NAS a try. But I also went one step further and got this specific ASRock motherboard because it also has specific listed ECC support on ASRock's website. That is almost the entire reason why I went with this motherboard. Oh, and it's M80X, so it fits in our case. CPU-wise, I'm gonna use a Ryzen 5 5500, which in terms of CPU power is quite overkill for a NAS. You know, a little bit of headroom's never bad. I also got one of these, an HBA card, so that I can plug all of these hard drives into this motherboard. Case-wise, I'm going with this Fractal Design Node 804 because it's a relatively compact case that supports 8 hard drives, which again is why I have 8 hard drives. Now, in a very uncharacteristic for me fashion, let's assemble this system outside of the case first to see that it's working. Now, one of the reasons that I also wanted M80X was so that I have some expandability options on this motherboard, which makes its weird 2.5 gigabit chipset less of a problem, because if I need 10 gigabit Ethernet later down the line, I can just drop it in one of these slots. I will say it does feel a bit weird using a motherboard that looks like this for a NAS, but why not have some gamer bling, you know? Now, because of our 5500, this isn't going to be a hyper-efficient NAS in terms of power draw, but this is quite an efficient chip, and it's potentially not going to be doing a whole lot. Whoa, that was so lucky. I'm also going to use the stock cooler, although if it gets a bit noisy, I can swap this out later in future if I need to. Now, I didn't go with a Ryzen APU for this build because apparently that does introduce some compatibility issues with ECC RAM. And yeah, I didn't want to introduce any more compatibility issues. Power supply wise, I'm going to use this, again, massive overkill 850 watt FSP unit, which FSP sent over for a video ages ago. I haven't gotten around to using it yet, so I'm going to use it in this system because this is going to be a reliable power supply. I'm not going to use near to its 850 watts, but yeah, it's just good power supply. Oh, never mind, I'm not going to use it. It's an SFX power supply. I don't know how I missed that detail. Let me go find another one. Okay, well, I guess I'll use this RM750E instead. Now, before we fire this up, I'm gonna drop a graphics card in here because I do want to check out the BIOS and see what's going on in the system, and I've got just the candidate for that. Ah, yes. The perfect specimen. Oh, well, the moment I plugged it in, the motherboard's lit up, so that's a good start. There we go. And after ages of memory training, we were in business. Okay, new CPU installed. It's a good sign that this is all working. And the next step, after ineffectively pawing at the BIOS, was final assembly. Oh, it's actually a bit bigger than I was expecting it to be, but it looks pretty badass. It looks very NAS-esque. So these trays are where we're going to be mounting our 8 hard drives. This is on the back of the motherboard tray. The power supply mounts in here and the drive's just above that. Oh, there are like no standoffs. I see. Now the eagle-eyed of you probably noticed that I just have 6 SATA ports on this motherboard, which is less than 8 hard drives. But luckily I have a very high effort workaround. One of these bad boys, which requires a whole lot of firmware being reflashed to IT mode and whatever, which seems like the kind of thing that I'm not nearly smart enough to do, but we'll see. Hopefully it goes fine later in the video. For now, let's just drop it into the system and take it from there. Wow, that looks well servery. And again, you may still be confused because this does not have SATA ports on the front, but I got a couple of these mini SAS to SATA port adapters so that we can plug our hard drives into this thing. Okay. They've both clipped. So either they're broken or they're connected. One of the two. Clearly, cable management is going to be a real fun time back here, but before we worry about that, let's install our massive amount of storage on these sleds. Oh. Oh. Wow, I've almost dropped it twice. And then you terrifiedly slide the drive. Okay, that is the first of our very expensive drives seated. So now we've just got 7 more to go. This is one of those processes that you kind of get bored over the duration of it. I'm gonna become progressively less careful as it goes on, and then that's when terrible things happen. But luckily, nothing terrible happened with the first batch, just leaving me with this sexy bank of hard drives. Wow, I am sweating bullets over here. This is very stressful. And after finishing up the second bank of hard drives while sweating like a racehorse on steroids, I was left with quite a mean-looking machine. So now that we've finished building the beast, a process that was pretty straightforward, now comes the fun part, which is setting it up, something which seems quite a bit more complicated. The first step is to flash a new BIOS on our HBA card, because the old one's all stinky and TrueNAS is a germaphobe, which involves getting a flash drive and making FreeDOS and BIOS files happen on the flash drive, and then inevitably having the system reject the flash drive after the first try. Why is it doing that? And the second. Okay, it's unhappy again. What in the world? And the third try. Now it's just broken again. Oh my god. Until eventually you give up and plug the HBA card into a much older motherboard which isn't completely disgusted by non-UEFI things. Hey, that seems to be working. FreeDOS just discriminates against young hardware. That's kind of rude of it. At this point, lots of DOS hacker manning has to happen until the card successfully says IT mode next to its name. Yay! Success! Okay, very good. And now is the perfect time to put the HBA card back in the NAS and start the process of installing TrueNAS. Luckily, the initial TrueNAS installation was real straightforward. I just followed the steps and it installed. But then I ran into a bit of an issue. Wait, why isn't it giving me an IP address for me to connect to? But despite rebooting several times, the NAS still wasn't connecting to the network. Okay, so I've tried a bunch of stuff, none of it worked. So let me move it closer to where it's gonna live and plug it into a different Ethernet port. So hopefully, it finds it now? But despite me pointing at stuff during the boot process to trick the system into thinking I knew what I was doing, it still didn't find the network. So it turns out the motherboard has some weird 2.5 gigabit LAN chipset on it, so I'm willing to bet a substantial amount of money that's the problem. So I'm gonna quickly run home and pull the just normal Intel gigabit network card out of my home PC, and hopefully that fixes it. So just one second.
A few moments later.
Okay, so this is just an Intel Gigabit Ethernet card. It should work. If it doesn't work with this, it's a different issue we have. It sounds like firing up the Starship Enterprise. That's crazy. Yes! Look at that. Got an IP address, so now we can connect to it and make NAS happen. Yeah. Here is our... I mean, it's not 176 terabyte at this point because they're not actually 22 terabyte drives. So now I need to figure out how to make RAID happen with this and then turn it into a pool. For this NAS, I wanted to use RAID 6 so that 2 of the 8 drives can die without me losing my data. Now, for some reason, TrueNAS calls this RAID Z2. I guess they're hipsters or something. And once I created my big storage pool, I was left with 113 terabytes of space, which feels quite a lot less than I was expecting to get, to be honest. But it still gives me a lot of additional space above the 60 terabytes of data I already have. And next, I had to go through the unnecessarily complicated process of making that storage accessible on the network. Okay, so now, with that frankly terrifying process over, now comes the real fun. Copying 60 terabytes worth of data onto that NAS over gigabit Ethernet. I just started copying 1.5 terabyte, and it says it's gonna take 3 hours and 45 minutes. And then after that, I still have 58.5 to go. In fact, according to this data transfer calculator, the process is gonna take 6.5 days, which really puts into perspective how much 60 terabytes is, or how slow gigabit Ethernet is, depending on your outlook on life. And at this point, it really is my pathetic network bottlenecking this transfer. So what I'm gonna do is order some 10 gigabit network stuff so we can run into different bottlenecks. I'll do a short to update you on how much of a performance difference that makes. Because at this point it's a day and a half later and I've only copied the 112 terabyte drives worth of data over. Which brings me to the end of the video, so subscribe to the channel if you don't want to miss the update. Thank you for watching, and until then, bye bye.